The room goes quiet. Not the quiet of empty seats, but the quiet of 30 journalists holding their breath at the same time. A tape recorder sits on the table, its red light blinking. Alain Prost is seated behind a microphone, still wearing his race suit, hair damp, eyes calm. The kind of calm that does not come from peace. The kind that comes from a man who has already decided exactly how much he is willing to give the room. And then the journalist from the Italian press pool leans forward, clears his throat, and says it. Slowly. With the deliberate weight of someone who has been saving that sentence for the right moment. He says that, in his opinion, and in the opinion of many people watching, Alain Prost did not win the 1989 Formula One World Championship by racing. He won it by cheating. The room does not react. It does not need to. Everyone in that room is watching Prost. And Prost looks at the journalist for exactly 2 seconds. Then he says 5 words. 5 words that end the interview, silence the room, and travel through every press wire in Europe before midnight. If you want to understand what those 5 words were, and what gave a 4-time world champion the right to say them with that kind of absolute authority, you need to go back to the beginning. Not to the race, to the season. Because what happened at Suzuka on the 22nd of October, 1989, was not an isolated incident. It was the final scene of a story that had been building for 2 years, inside the same garage, between the 2 fastest drivers on the planet, with 1 team and 1 championship, and not enough room for both of them. If you are watching this for the first time, welcome. Stay until the end. What Prost said in that room matters in a way that goes beyond Formula One. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, told the way they actually happened. The 1989 season was supposed to belong to McLaren Honda, and in many ways it did. The McLaren MP 4/5 was a machine of extraordinary precision, built around a Honda Feed 10 engine that produced more power than anything else on the grid. Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost were teammates inside the same red and white car, and together they dominated the field so completely that the real championship was never between McLaren and the rest of the grid. It was between the 2 men sharing the pit wall. The season had started with tension. At the San Marino Grand Prix in Imola in May, the 2 drivers had made a private agreement. Whoever led into the first corner would not be challenged by the other at the start. It was a safety agreement, a practical one. Prost won the first start. He held the line. But the race was red-flagged after Gerhard Berger crashed heavily at Tamburello. When the race was restarted, Prost won the start again, and Senna, deciding in his own mind that the agreement applied only to the original start, passed him. Prost held his tongue in public. He did not hold it for long. He told a French journalist what had happened between himself and Senna. Against his wishes, the story was published. Senna denied the agreement had ever existed. A Marlboro representative named John Hogan, who had been present when the agreement was made, confirmed that it had. Senna was furious. The relationship between the 2 drivers, which had already been cooling for a year, collapsed completely. By May of 1989, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna were no longer on speaking terms inside the garage that employed them both. What followed was one of the most extraordinary internal battles in the history of professional sport. 2 men of exceptional talent, sharing the most advanced car in the world, not exchanging a single word, communicating through engineers, through strategy boards, through race results. Prost won 4 races in the first half of the season. Senna won 6. But Senna's season was fractured by mechanical retirements, by incidents, by the kind of misfortune that accumulates into a points deficit that becomes harder to close with each passing race. Going into the Japanese Grand Prix, the penultimate round of the season, Prost led the championship by 16 points. Senna had to win both remaining races and hope that Prost scored nothing in either one. It was not a comfortable position. It was mathematically possible, but it required everything to go right for Senna and nothing to go right for Prost. And Alain Prost, the man the paddock called the Professor, the man who had built 4 world championships on the foundation of calculation and patience and the art of winning without wasting, had already decided how the race at Suzuka would go. The circuit at Suzuka was designed by a Dutch engineer named John Hugenholtz, and it is unlike any other track in Formula One. It crosses itself in a figure of 8. It has a flyover. It has a sequence of corners in the first sector that are taken at speeds that make most human beings deeply uncomfortable just to read about. 130R, a long, high-speed right-hand bend that, at the time, was taken flat in qualifying and was not flat in the race when you were within half a second of another car. The chicane that followed was the only real overtaking opportunity on the entire circuit. Everyone knew it. Prost knew it. He told reporters gathered at Suzuka before the race that he would not be opening the door for Senna at the chicane. Not this time. Not on this day. The words were precise. He had told Senna through team boss Ron Dennis before the race that in previous seasons he had occasionally moved aside when challenged to prevent contact between the two cars. He would not be doing that at Suzuka. If Senna wanted to pass him, Senna would have to find a gap that was not there. The race was dry. The temperature in the morning was mild. Prost had made a subtle modification to his car without informing Senna. He had removed the gurney flap, a small aerodynamic device on the rear wing, to reduce drag and improve straight-line speed. It was a legal change. It was also a tactical one. Less downforce meant a car better suited to defending a lead on a high-speed circuit where straight-line pace mattered. Prost had thought about this race the way he thought about every race. He had identified what he needed and removed what he did not. When the lights went out, Prost made a clean start and led into the first corner. Senna, who had started from pole, was caught slightly off the line. Gerhard Berger in the Ferrari got alongside him momentarily. It was a small detail that would matter later, because from that moment on, Prost controlled the race the way he controlled most things, clinically, precisely, from the front. For 46 laps, Senna hunted him. In traffic, the gap closed. On a clear track, Prost extended it. He was driving, as several observers noted afterward, in the style they were more accustomed to seeing from Senna. Fast, assertive, not giving an inch. On lap 47 of 53, Senna made his move. With 6 laps remaining and the championship at stake, he pulled alongside Prost, going into the chicane. What happened next has been analyzed on video hundreds of times. Prost turned into the corner at the point where he always turned in. Senna was alongside him. The two cars made contact. Both came to a halt in the escape road, side by side, having missed the chicane entirely. Prost stepped out of his car immediately. He walked away. The championship, he believed, was over. Senna stayed in the cockpit. He gestured frantically at the marshals. They pushed his car. The engine fired. He drove through the barriers, rejoined the track after the chicane, came into the pits to replace a damaged front wing, and then proceeded to hunt down Alessandro Nannini, who had inherited the lead, and pass him to win the race. The crowd at Suzuka witnessed it. 150 countries watched it on television, and then, several hours later, the stewards disqualified Senna for the manner in which he had rejoined the track, for missing the chicane, for accepting an illegal push start in a position where the regulations did not permit it. The win was awarded to Nannini. The championship was awarded to Prost. and a fury was unleashed that would not be contained. Ayrton Senna was not a man who accepted decisions quietly when he believed the decisions were wrong. He believed this decision was not only wrong, but political. Jean-Marie Balestre, the president of the governing body known as FISA, was French. Alain Prost was French. Balestre had reportedly entered the steward's room during deliberations on the incident, an intervention that drew criticism from many people in and around the sport, and that Max Mosley, who would later succeed Balestre as president, described years afterward as fixing the entire outcome. Senna paid a $100,000 fine and faced a 6-month suspended ban. He threatened to retire. He did not retire. He came to the Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide 2 weeks later and called what witnesses described as one of the most emotionally charged press conferences in the history of the sport, requesting the media's help against what he called the systematic manipulation of a result. Some reporters left that room having moved from skepticism to sympathy. Others did not. And through all of it, Alain Prost said relatively little. He gave interviews, he answered questions, but he did not engage with Senna's narrative in public with the kind of heat that Senna brought to it. He said the collision was Senna's fault. He said he had been clear before the race that he would not open the door. He said the championship had been decided correctly. He said these things calmly, in measured language, with the same economy of expression he applied to racing. And this made people more angry, not less. Because calmness, in the face of accusation, can look like guilt. It can look like the composed silence of a man who knows what he did and has decided not to discuss it. That misreading of Alain Prost would follow him for years, which brings us back to the press conference. The date was the 22nd of October, 1989. The room was inside the Suzuka Circuit Complex. Prost sat at the table with the formal stillness of a man who had answered questions for a long time and had learned to be careful about which ones he answered fully. The journalist from Italy had prepared his question. He delivered it in the manner of a prosecution, not an inquiry. In his characterization, the collision was deliberate. The result was engineered. The championship was not won on the track. It was taken in the steward's room with the help of a governing body president who shared a nationality with the beneficiary of the ruling. He finished speaking. He waited. The other journalists in the room waited. The tape recorders blinked. Prost looked at him, not with anger, not with contempt, with the particular expression of a man who has just heard something he has heard before, has already decided what it is worth, and has chosen his response not in that moment, but long before it. And he said, in the quiet of that room, 5 words. He said, "I won the championship fairly." Then he stood up, gathered the papers in front of him, and left. The press conference was over. No further questions were taken because there was no one left to take them from. The journalist sat with his recorder still running and nothing new on the tape. Those 5 words moved through the paddock by the time the teams were packing their equipment into the transporters. They were transmitted along the press wires before the circuit lights were turned off. By the following morning, they had appeared in newspapers in Italy, in France, in England, in Brazil. Not because 5 words from a press conference were extraordinary, but because of the weight behind them, because Prost had not defended himself. He had not explained himself. He had not engaged with the accusation in the way the journalist had wanted him to, had not stepped into the arena that had been set up for exactly that kind of fight. He had simply stated the result, as though the result was the only thing that required stating, as though everything else in the room was noise. And there is something in that response that tells you more about who Alain Prost was than any race win could. He was not a man built for theater. He was not a man who needed the crowd to understand him in real time. He was a man who believed that what happened on the track or in the championship standings was the permanent record. Everything else was commentary. What happened in the years that followed made the story more complicated, as the truth usually does. Exactly 1 year later, at the same circuit, at the same first corner, Senna drove his McLaren into the side of Prost's Ferrari on the opening lap of the 1990 Japanese Grand Prix, eliminating his rival and securing his second championship. He said at the time it was a racing incident. 2 years after that, at Suzuka in 1991, he admitted in a press conference that he had done it deliberately. He said 1989 had been unforgivable. He said he had been robbed, and in doing so, he gave Prost something that no court ruling or championship declaration could have provided. He confirmed, from his own mouth, that the man who said those 5 words had been telling the truth all along. The championship of 1989 had been decided by a collision that most neutral observers watching the footage attributed at least in part to Senna's attempt at a pass that did not have enough space to succeed. What followed that collision, the disqualification, the ruling, the political interference that may or may not have influenced the outcome, that was a separate matter. Complicated, contested, still contested today. But the collision itself, and the decision Prost had made before the race, the decision not to move, not to leave a gap he did not need to leave, not to sacrifice his championship to avoid a contact his teammate had forced, that decision was legal. It was cold. It was calculated. It was entirely consistent with how Alain Prost had won every title he ever won. The paddock never fully absolved him. The myth of the professor who used politics instead of pace to beat the genius from Brazil was too useful a story to let the facts complicate it. Some journalists built careers on that myth. Some continue to repeat it today. But the people who were inside the sport, who understood the engineering, the strategy, the championship mathematics, who understood what it meant to sit in a car at 150 miles per hour going into a chicane and hold your line against a man who was willing to crash you both to win a title, those people understood something different. They understood that Prost had told Senna, clearly and in advance, what he was going to do. And then he did it. And then he sat in a room and said 5 words, and left. Alain Prost won 4 world championships. He won 51 Grands Prix, a record that stood for 14 years until Michael Schumacher surpassed it. He retired after the 1993 season, having won the title with Williams-Renault, and he carried the coffin of Ayrton Senna at the funeral in Brazil in May of 1994, 4 months after that final embrace in Adelaide. Whatever existed between them was never simple. It was never clean. But it was never small either. And the 5 words Prost said in that room in Suzuka on the 22nd of October, 1989, are still the most precise answer anyone ever gave to the question of how he raced. He raced to win. And when he won, he said so. And then he walked out of the room, because there was nothing left to say.